Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV and we're back with another sponsored tutorial from Synology. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at their active backup for Google Workspace, along with their active backup for Microsoft 365. And what these two applications do is take everything on your business cloud account and back them up on a regular basis to your NAS locally, so you have a copy of the files that nobody can take away from you. So of course we often consider cloud services to be super safe because they're managed by these big companies, but you never know when something might happen to the data. A lot of times an employee might do something on purpose or by accident that wipes out a lot of data. Maybe you don't want to keep accounts for people that have left your company and want to store their data somewhere without having to pay a monthly fee for it. And that is some of the advantages of backing up your cloud accounts locally. And we're going to explore setting this process up both on the Microsoft and the Google side. And then we'll look at what you can do with this data when you have it backed up locally on the NAS. Now, before we get into this, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this is a paid sponsorship from Synology, and they reviewed and approved this video before it was posted for accuracy. So let's get into it now and set up our cloud services for local backup. Now, these apps will be compatible with mostly the Plus series Synology NAS devices like this 1019 Plus here that I have on the desk. And you can see a full list on screen right now, and I'll also link to the list down below in the video description as new models become available. Now, additionally, this will not work with personal versions of the Google or Microsoft cloud services. You have to be subscribed to 365 for Business on the Microsoft side or Google Workspace on the Google side. So let's begin the process of getting this working. We're first going to go over to the Package Center on our Synology NAS. And what we're going to do is install two things. One is active backup for Google Workspace, and the other is active backup for Microsoft 365. I'm going to let these two install on my 1019 Plus here, and when it's done, we'll begin with the Office 365 process, and then we'll do the Google one. All right, the installation process is complete, and you'll note here that we have not only the active backup applications for both Google and Microsoft, but we also have portals that we'll be using for managing the data that we have backed up, and we'll be looking at those a little bit later in the video. But let's start off with the Microsoft backup first here and walk through the process. The first thing you need to do is activate. Now, the backup apps are free to use. You can back up as many accounts as you want, provided you have storage for them. But you do need to activate the applications first with Synology before you can get started. So I'm going to walk through that process right now, logging in with my Synology account. And when we're done with the activation, we'll continue on from there. So the activation now has been completed. And what I want to do before we set up our backup task is to create a folder where these backups will be stored on our file system here. So I'm going to jump over to the control panel. I'm going to go to Shared Folder. And what I'm going to do is create a new shared folder. And I'm doing this just so I have a spot on my NAS where I know this data is going to be stored. So I'm going to call this Microsoft 365 Backup. And I'm going to click on Next here. And we'll just go through the process here of setting this up. Now, I am logged in as the administrator on this device, of course. And we don't need to set user-level permissions for the file share we just created. So I'm going to leave everything at the default here. But what I am going to do is go over to System Internal User, and I am going to set the Office 365 Active Backup to read and write so that that application can write its files to that file share that we just set up. And I'm going to click Save here and enable that. So now our file share is ready. So let's jump back over to the setup process here. I'm going to create a new backup task. And we're going to select Microsoft 365 because I am hosting with Microsoft. And we also need a certificate that's going to be required for this to work. So you need to set a strong password here in order for this to work correctly. So I'm going to type in something that hopefully passes muster here with the password manager. And at this point, I would write the password down because we're going to need the password in a little while to create that certificate. So I've got my strong password typed in here. I'm going to click on Next now. And now what's going to happen is we're going to be taken out to Microsoft. And here I need to log in with my administrator account for my Office 365 service. And I've created a dummy account for the purposes of today's video. That's why we're not blurring anything out here, so you can see exactly what all the screens are going to look like. So now that I have logged in, there are a number of permissions that are being requested by the Synology app, and it's going to need access to pretty much everything in order to allow these backups to occur. So we're going to accept this, because we have our security well situated here at the home headquarters. And we're going to let this process here for a second. And after this is done, we should get kicked back over to the Synology app so that we can begin the backup process. So I'm going to click on Agree here. And now it's going to continue the process of getting everything registered. So now that registration process is complete and our certificate has been generated, and what we need to do now is download the certificate, and you want to store this somewhere safe. I would maybe put it on a flash drive and put it in a safe or something just so you have it, because this will be an important part of the authentication process here. So now I'm going to download that to my downloads folder here. And I'm going to go up to the task settings here, and I'm going to call this Lon Incorporated Backup. And now we're going to select the folder that we created a few minutes ago to back that up to. And I'm going to have it back up everything, but you can actually set this on a user-by-user basis. Now, as you can see here, we have the ability to get in on a granular level to decide what we back up from each user. By default, it's going to back up everything, but I could decide maybe that for my test account, I don't need their drive files, and I could uncheck that if I wanted to. You can also set things up based on groups that you have configured on the Microsoft side. So for example, if you have a group in tech support, every time a new tech support user is added, those same settings will apply to that user automatically. So you do have a good amount of control over this. But I'm going to click OK here. And we're going to enable the portal here as well. Now, the portal will allow your users to go into their account that's backed up on the NAS locally to restore files or browse through the backup. Now, if you disable this, they won't be able to do that, but I think there might be a good argument for giving users the ability to restore some of their own files if they were to mess something up. So we're going to enable that. And in a few minutes when we look at the portal, I'll show you how to set privileges on an individual user basis. We'll click on Next here. Now the next screen here is to configure auto discovery services. And what this will do is allow you to set rules for every time a new user is added to your 365 account. And as you can see by default right now, everything gets backed up for that new user when they're added. But of course, you could set more specific rules on the group level later. Additionally, you can have it look for new groups, new sites, and new teams if you're using those things as well, so you can be assured that you don't miss anything when you add new people to your enterprise here. Now, the next option is for setting up the backup and retention policy. And one of the best ways to go, I think, is to probably set it on a schedule just to limit bandwidth, but you could have it back up continuously. Now, as far as scheduling is concerned, you've got a lot of granularity here. By default, it's going to run once a day at 5 a.m. local time. But what I could do here is have it run only on the weekdays, and that would exclude Saturday and Sunday when maybe nothing is getting changed. Additionally, I can also set it to run multiple times each day, so I can have it run every hour starting at 5 a.m., and I could have it stop running at 8 p.m., for example. And what it will do is every hour, it'll go out and see what has changed on the cloud side versus what's stored locally, and then it'll bring down all of those changes and store them here. Now, I'm going to set mine back to just a daily schedule here because we are going to fire this thing off manually a few times during our video. And you also have a retention policy. Now, by default, it's going to keep all versions of the files that are being changed or updated in the cloud. But if you want to save space, you can limit the number of days that versions will be kept. So for example, we could say keep only the last 30 days of changes, and then after that, delete the revisions, but keep the one that is current. And this is up to you to decide which of these options will work best in your enterprise environment. A lot of organizations require that everything be kept forever, all variations included. So you'll have to decide with your legal department what makes most sense for you. All right, so now that we have everything set up here, I'm going to click on Done. And we're going to add this task, and maybe we'll just run a backup now and get everything started. So we're going to let this do its thing, and when it's done, we'll take a look at what we have after that first backup is complete. All right, our first backup is complete, and you can see on the calendar here that we had a successful backup here on Monday. And if I scroll down a little bit, we get some statistics as to how much storage these backups are taking on my local NAS here. So now let's get the Google account set up, and then we'll look at the portal and how it interacts with both services. Now the Google process is a little more involved, so we're going to click on the active backup for Google Workspace. And like before, we have to activate here with our Synology account. So let me do that real quick, and we'll pick up the rest of the process from there. All right, so now the app is activated, and I have to put in the domain name and the admin email address for the Google Workspace account that I want to attach. Now, the next thing it wants is a service key. This is essentially like the certificate that we saw before on the Microsoft side. But what we have to do first is go into the Google admin console and set up this service key and then upload it back to the NAS. So let's step through the process now of getting that key put together. Okay, so here we are on the admin console for this account. I'm going to go over here to the left-hand corner and click on Apps and then click on Overview. And what we want to do is select this first item, Google Workspace, from the list of apps. And next what we're going to do here is look for Drive and Docs. I'm going to click on that. And now we have to go to another console, the Google Developers Console, and enable some additional features there. By the way, I'll have links to both of these consoles in the video description, along with the Synology support document that will take you through these Google steps one by one. But we're going to do it here on the video also for those of you who are more visual learners like me. So now we've got the Google Developer Console open here. And what we need to do now is create a new project. So I'm going to click on Create here. And one tip here, when you go into that Developer Console, I found that it often defaults to your personal Google account first. So you do want to make sure you're logged in with the admin account for your Workspace account like I am here. If you're not, you just click that icon up here in the right-hand corner, and that will take care of things for you. I'm going to call this Synology Backup as my project name. You can call it really whatever you want. And I'm going to click on Create now. All right, so we've got that project created. The next thing we need to do is set some API and service permissions here. If you don't see API and services on screen after you create that project, click on the navigation menu and just click on it there. And what we want to do is go over to the library section here, and then we're going to be presented with a number of other options. Now this next part is going to be a little tedious, but we have to go through each of these in order to get this to work. So the first thing we need to search for is the admin SDK API, and we have it right here. So I'm going to click on that and then click on Enable. And then we've got to go back to that search menu again and repeat the process for a number of other APIs. So we have that one enabled. We need to go back to the library here. We're going to go look for Google People API, and we'll repeat the process with that. So we'll click Enable there, and we'll give that a second to enable, and then we'll do the next one. So there we go. We'll go back to the library, and the next one is Gmail. And basically what we're doing is we are creating permissions so that this backup application can hit all of these different applications that live inside of the Google Workspace ecosystem here. So we just did the Gmail one. Now we're going to do the Google Calendar one. And again, we're just going to type these in one by one. And I do think going to that Synology support document would be really helpful here because it lists everything step by step that you need to do. And I am following this guide right now as we go through enabling all of these different APIs. The last one here is the Google Drive API, which I'm going to select here and enable. So now that we have that done, the The next step is to enable a few more things. All right, next up, we've got to go over to the hamburger icon here and select IAM and admin. And from here, we need to go over to service accounts. And as you can see right now, we have no service accounts on here, so we have to create one. So I'm going to click on create here, and I'm going to call this active backup for Google Workspace. And then I'm going to click create and continue. And then we need to click on this role option here. And what we need to do is just go down to the project option on the list of things that we can assign. And we're going to select owner here. And now we're going to click on done. And we'll let that process. Now we are getting there, but there are still some things to configure here. So now that we have this project set up, what I'm going to do is go over to Actions and go to Manage Keys. And this is where we're going to create our new key. So what I'm going to do here is go Add Key and hit Create New Key. And they do recommend that you use JSON as the format here. So we're going to click on Create. And what this is going to do is download our key to our computer. And like the Microsoft example, you're going to want to hold on to that key because we're going to need that in a little bit to upload back to the NAS. Now, after you download, you're going to be in this Key tab here. What you need to do next is go over to Details, and in the details, you will have a unique identifier. And what I would suggest you do here, according to the guide that we're following, is to just copy and paste this into Notepad or write it down somewhere, because we're going to need that unique ID in a little bit. All right, now we have to go back to the admin console that we were in earlier, and we need to find security on the left-hand side of the screen, but you're not going to see it right away because it's hidden, at least for me, underneath this Show More section. So I'm going to click on that, and now I will see an option for security. So I'm going to pull this down. And what we want to look for is access and data control, and then API controls. All right, we're almost there, I promise. The next step here is to go over to the domain-wide delegation under these API controls. And you're going to have an option here for Add New, which we're going to click on right now. And this is where having that unique identifier pasted into Notepad will be really helpful, because you can just paste the number in here. Now you'll notice I can't authorize it yet because I have to put in a list of scopes that we want to enable. And the best way to get those scopes is to follow the document that we've been following and just copy and paste the scopes out of step 21 here. So I'm going to copy those in there, and then we're going to jump back over to here and paste those in. And now you can see I'm able to authorize this. So I'm going to click on Authorize. And now I think we should be ready to start the next step, which is backing up this Google account. All right, so we are back to where we started now. And what we're going to do is upload that service key that we downloaded in the middle of that process earlier. So we're going to click on that. I've got my credentials here typed in properly from before. And I'm going to click on Next now. And we're going to call this regular backup. And the destination folder is going to be the Google Workspace backup folder that I created a little bit earlier. Now, the process of creating that folder was identical to the process that I followed for the Microsoft 365 example we looked at a little earlier in this video. There is a difference, though, in that we have to assign the permissions to the application for Google versus the one for Microsoft. So if I go over here to System Internal User as we did before, you can see that I have the G Suite application here set to read-write. Now, at the time I'm recording this video, Google had just finished their process of changing G Suite to Workspace. So the app is called Active Backup G Suite at the moment on the Synology side, although it could change in the future and call itself Workspace. Either way, we have it here assigned now to the proper application, and I'm going to click Save to lock that in. And what I'm going to do now is go back to our setup process here. And as you can see, I've got 2 users on that account that are set to go. And I'm also going to enable the portal, which we'll look at in a minute or two. And I'm going to click Next here. And as you can see, I have access to Drive, Contacts, shared drives, calendar, and mail, very similar to what we had on the Microsoft side. We're going to click on Next here. Again, you've got the similar options for how to conduct the backup. The default here is continuous backup, which of course will run automatically every couple of minutes, but we could have it run on a schedule like we did on the other ones. I think I'll set that one to that schedule. And we also have retention policies similar to the Microsoft ones, where we can preserve all versions of files, or we can store versions of files for a certain number of days before those revisions are deleted. So at the moment, the default here is 30 days of revision history, and then after the 30 days, the older revisions get deleted. And I will just have it set to preserve all versions here. And I'm going to click Done. And now it's going to create the task, and we're going to run the backup now. And hopefully we set up everything correctly. And in a minute or two, we'll see if we had a successful backup. All right, our backup was successful here. And one thing I wanted to show you is that in the task list, you can select your backup and click on Edit here and make some changes to the basic configuration. One thing we didn't talk about on the setup that we saw on the Microsoft side is that the Google version has an auto discovery service for new users also. So as you create new users on your Workspace account, by default, it will automatically add their Drive, contacts, shared files, calendar, and mail to the mix. And then, of course, you can go in on a user-by-user basis and make specific changes here. You also have shared drive options here for drives that are being shared with your users. And then, of course, we have the backup policies that we saw during the setup phase. If we go over to Overview, you'll have an indicator as to how your backups are working. So you have a little calendar here to show you which days were backed up successfully and how many backups are in those days. And then, of course, you can see the disk space usage here as well. Now, what I want to do next is jump into the portals, and we'll begin with the Microsoft portal and do some file restorations and see how all of that works. And a lot of what you're going to see on the Microsoft side also works the same way on the Google side. But what we'll do is we'll stick to Microsoft initially and then maybe do a quick overview of those same operations on Google so you can see how it might interact with the user interface a little differently there. But I found for the most part, things work fairly similar to each other. Now, the portal here is one of those applications that got installed when we set this up. And I'm going to set up the active backup from Microsoft 365 portal here. And that's going to open a new tab in my browser. And I'll have access now to everything in my Microsoft 365 account because it is backing up everything. And by everything, I mean all of the applications and all of the users using those applications that you have specified for backup. So once that backup is complete, all of that stuff is going to reside locally here. And if we take a look at the portal, we are currently looking at the administrator account here. And we are looking right now at their OneDrive files. And as you can see, I've got 4 files on the OneDrive. And if I click on Export here, what will happen is I can download this file that was in the cloud, that got backed up locally to this NAS, and download the file from the NAS to my computer here so I can see what's going on. And if I click on that file that I just downloaded, you can see that happens to be a picture of a watch. Now, let's say I go over to my OneDrive here and I delete that file. So let's click on delete here, and this is on the OneDrive side. So now the file is deleted. Now, of course, there are ways to get files back from deletion on the cloud, but let's say you had a user that totally wiped it out, or they didn't realize they deleted a file until long past the time in which those files are retained by Microsoft. No problem. You jump into the portal here. We'll go back here. And I'll just select that file and click on Restore. And when I click Restore, what it's going to do is write the file back to the cloud. Now, what I can do for safety is put that in a new folder, or I could restore it to the original spot and overwrite an existing item or skip an existing item. I'm going to say skip just to be safe. And I'm also going to restore the share permissions and click OK. And what's going to happen now is the file that was backed up locally is going to get retransmitted to the cloud and put back right where it was left. So you can see that was successful. If I go back to my thing here and just maybe do a quick refresh of the page, we will see that file having been returned. So let's do a refresh here, and sure enough, there is the file right where we left it, exactly how it was left. But as you saw, we backed up more than just the OneDrive, and if we go up to the corner here, you'll see this service button here. And if I click on service, I can select something else. So let's take a look at what mail has backed up here. And as you can see, I've got an image of my mailbox that's stored locally, and I can browse the current status of that mailbox from the last time that we backed up. Additionally, I can look at individual emails here too. So I can double click on this message, and as you can see, this is an email I sent to myself of an asteroid, and like the drive example, I can restore this back to the cloud, but I can also export this. And if I click export, what it will do is export it as a .eml file that you could load in locally with your Outlook client. So let's take a look at restoring an email that maybe somebody deleted. So right now I am in my Outlook, and I'm going to click on delete here, and for good measure I'm going to go to my deleted items and empty out the folder. So we're going to wipe it off my Outlook here completely, and as you can see, I just have one email in there right now. But let's go back over to our portal, and what I'm going to do now is jump back over to Mail, and we're going to go in and restore that email because based on the last backup that we did, we still have that email sitting here. So I'm going to click on that message, and I'm going to click on Restore, and I'm going to say this one mail in the inbox, the one that I selected, but I could also do the entire mailbox if we wanted to do that. But I'm going to click on that one here. And just like before, I can put this in its own folder, or I could put it where it was originally located. So let's just select the option that we had last time. I'm going to click OK now, and we'll let this queue up. And what it's going to do is restore that email back to my account where it was last left off. And that is now successful. And if we jump back over to Outlook, you can see the email is right where we left it, even though we had totally deleted it before. So this is an example of how these backups, when done regularly, can keep an archive of all of your users' stuff, even if they delete something and empty the trash. Now, as the administrator, I have access to all of the accounts on the Microsoft 365 service that I've attached this to. So for example, I can switch from my user here to the test user that I set up earlier, and I can look at that person's inbox here, as you can see. And here we've got an email that was looking for some confidential business information, so this might be helpful for the legal case that I'm working on, right? And additionally, what you'll have in the portal is a look at every iteration that has happened to the item that you're looking at. So down here I've got this movable timeline, and this was the first backup that I ran, and then I ran a second one over here, and I can see what has changed since that time. So you can see a new email came in between the two backups here that got added to the mix. And I can click on that and see what was inside of that email. Additionally, we can look at contacts and calendars and everything else, and you get the idea here as to how this all works. Basically, it takes snapshots of the entire 365 account. It stores them locally here, and you can look at those things and restore them. Now, everything on the Google side works very much like what you just saw on the Microsoft side. So for example, if we go ahead and delete this email and then jump into our trash folder here and wipe it out completely, it is gone from my Google account. But if I go over to the portal, it is sitting right in there just like it was before. I can click on that and export it to a .eml file like we did earlier, but I can also restore this to the inbox like we did before with the very same set of options. So I'm just going to restore the one selected one that we've got here, and I'm going to click OK. The one difference here is that it will automatically make a label for that email when it's restored so you can quickly find it, because Gmail doesn't have the same folder structure that Outlook does. So I'm going to click OK here, and as you can see, it is going through that restore process now, and we'll give that a second to complete. And what it's doing is basically uploading that email back to the server. And if I jump over to my email here and click refresh, you'll see that the asteroid has been restored in all of its glory. But we also now have this tag here that is the tag for that back or that restoration job that we just did. So you can remove that later if you don't want it, but it'll give you a quick way to get back to it. But very easy here, just like it was on the Microsoft side. Now, if you're using Google Docs or spreadsheets or presentations, what it will do in the course of backing things up to your NAS is actually preserve them in a way that you can open them up locally. So for example, this document called test document gets a docx added to the end of it that would open right up in Microsoft Word, yet the file is a regular Google Doc on the server. And if I were to restore that file, I would get a Google Doc version of it again. So you have a lot of flexibility on these files for bringing them back to life. Another neat thing you can do here and also on the Microsoft side is actually move files between users. So let's say we had an employee leave the company. We don't want to keep paying for his account, so we can cancel the account up on the cloud. But because his account is stored locally here on the NAS device, I can restore his files and assign them to a different user. So for example here, if I wanted to have these two files go back up, but we want to assign them to the test user here, I can just select that user, click OK, and now those two files that were originally assigned to me can now be assigned to another user. Now the portals also allow you to search for particular keywords in any of the applications. So right now, for example, I'm in the Google email. I could search for get back to work. And as you can see, it found two emails that were in that user's account that told them to get back to work. And then I could restore them from here. I can export them out to EML files. You also can look at calendar entries. It puts them in a table format here, as you can see, but I could click this and export them all as a single ICS file, or of course click restore and send those things back to the cloud. And it works the same on both the Microsoft and the Google one here. Contacts are also stored here in a very similar table format. You can export these as a CSV file or click the restore button to send it back up to the cloud. Now, as the administrator, you have access, as I mentioned, to everything, every user and all the data that they're storing in every application. But you can also grant your users the ability to log into their own accounts and restore files. They can't delete anything off the NAS. They won't have access to that. But you can give them the ability to restore a file that they inadvertently deleted or messed up without having to generate a support call. Now, the way this works is that the username has to match the account name on the Google or Microsoft service. So for example, I have an account called Tester here, and that's the very same name that is on the Microsoft 365 account. And for good measure, I also put in their Microsoft 365 email address here on the email section. And what I had to do to get this to work was head over to the applications list here and assign them access to the Microsoft 365 portal. I don't have to give them access to the storage area, just the portal application. And then when they log in, and I'll show you what this looks like for that user, they will have the Microsoft portal available to them in this instance. And if they click on that, a new window opens up. And although this user doesn't have anything in their OneDrive at the moment, if I go over to their mail and click on their inbox, as you can see, their emails are accessible to them, and they can go ahead and export the email to their computer. They can also restore it back to the cloud. So they get similar functionality to what you have as the administrator, but only on their account. And again, the account name on your Synology NAS has to match the account name up in the cloud for that to work. Additionally, if you are using Active Directory on your Synology NAS, that will work as well for matching up these accounts. So I think you can see how this adds a ton of flexibility in that you've got an employee's entire work history that you can back up from the cloud to the NAS and keep it here forever. Even if you cancel your Google Workspace account down the road, you still have the data here, and it's all organized the same way it was on the cloud side. And I think that can provide, again, a lot of flexibility for small businesses, but large ones too. And there's no limit to how many accounts can be stored. And as you saw in the video, we were actually doing both Google and Microsoft at the same time on the same device here. I am sure you've got questions, so definitely leave them down in the comments below because those might help inform future videos. But we're starting to put together a total backup strategy here, where in the first video, we looked at active backup for business that backs up computers on your network. Now we've got the cloud stuff backed up. And in our next video, we're going to look at backing up the NAS so we can further protect our data. We've got it all in one place here. We've got to keep it secure. So that's going to be the subject of the next video in this series. I want to thank Synology for their support of the channel, and I want to thank you for watching. Until next time, this is Lon.TV.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, Brian Parker, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Baby Metal Fox God, Tom Albrecht, Amda Brown, Matt Zagaya, and Tech Time with Eric. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.